Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into an absolutely incredible, almost paradoxical success story. We are talking about an island nation born, quite literally, from nothing. We're exploring the deeply fascinating story of Cape Verde. Okay, let's start right off the bat with a serious question. How exactly do you build a nation out of just wind and rocks? Seriously, think about it for a second. What do you do when your land has no rivers, practically zero natural resources, and simply won't reliably grow food because of relentless droughts?
Well, as our source material reveals, the survival of this completely desolate volcanic archipelago relies on one very specific thing. There's a saying that Cape Verde has three resources: wind, rocks, and people. And with training, those people transform the rest into riches. The absolute key to their survival? It's human resilience.
So here's our roadmap for exploring over 500 years of this history. We're going to cover the uninhabited crossroads, then forging a Creole identity, trace the path to independence, look at building a modern democracy, and finally, surviving the elements.
Let's just jump right into part one, the uninhabited crossroads, moving from volcanic rocks to an Atlantic hub.
To give you the incredibly fast version of a very long history, this cluster of islands sits about 540 kilometers off the West African coast. When Portuguese explorers discovered them back in 1456, they were completely empty, uninhabited. But because of their super strategic location, things changed fast. By the 16th century, the archipelago was transformed into a really dark hub for the transatlantic slave trade. Fast forward through centuries of economic booms and busts, and by the 1860s, shifting global shipping routes turned the islands into a vital maritime coaling station for steamships. And that long colonial era just kept going, all the way until they finally gained independence in 1975.
Which brings us nicely to Section 2, Forging a Creole Identity, or the Blending of Worlds.
You know, that incredibly dark era of slavery had a profound, albeit unintended, consequence on these islands. It forced the collision of African, Portuguese, and Brazilian cultures. This sparked what's known as Creolization. It's basically the spontaneous blending of cultures that actually broke down those rigid colonial racial divisions, creating a bridged fluidity between races and classes. This deep, historical process forged a completely unique cultural identity that is literally the foundation of modern Cape Verdean society.
And honestly, you can literally taste this history in their national dish, cachupa. It's this amazing mix where local field corn meets European bean varieties, tossed together with fresh or salted fish, some meats or sausage, and these incredibly vibrant global spices like cumin and bay leaves. It's way more than just the meal, it is their entire transatlantic history layered right there in a single pot to feed a community.
Out of all this hardship and cultural mixing came a really powerful concept known as morabeza. It's essentially the Cape Verdean spirit. The source material defines it as a simplicity that comes from looking life constantly in the eyes. It's this beautiful embrace of life's intense hardships, which you usually see expressed through their incredibly soulful music, dance, and profound emotional poetry.
There is a quote from the text that just nails this worldview perfectly. Some African nations seek justification in reason, but the Cape Verdeans justify everything in feelings and hopes. I mean, think about it. When the ground you stand on offers you nothing but volcanic rock and drought, poetry, song, and hope aren't just art, they're absolutely your greatest survival tools.
So let's move into Section 3, the path to independence, focusing on the peaceful struggle for sovereignty.
By the mid-20th century, that distinct Creole identity we just talked about fueled a massive desire to finally break free from Portuguese rule. The independence movement was spearheaded by Amilcar Cabral and the PAGC. But what's genuinely fascinating here is how they did it. Unlike a lot of other anti-colonial struggles in Africa that saw widespread violence, Cape Verde's push was relatively mild. They leaned heavily on mass organization, intellectual persuasion, and crucially, huge support from their exiled diaspora.
And it worked. That brings us to 1975, the year the islands officially became an independent republic. But, gotta be honest, the honeymoon phase was short. The new nation inherited a complete mess. We're talking severe, relentless droughts, massive soil erosion, a failing agrarian setup, and virtually zero infrastructure thanks to centuries of colonial neglect.
So how did they handle that? That's Section 4, Building a Modern Democracy and Finding Stability Against the Odds.
Despite inheriting socioeconomic odds that would frankly cripple most new nations, Cape Verde entirely rewrote its own story. Look at the contrast here.
Pre-1975, colonial neglect, sky-high illiteracy, and relying on crops that wouldn't grow. Post-1975, they systematically built a peaceful multi-party democracy and achieved a staggering 86% literacy rate. Through some seriously smart technical governance and a smooth shift to multi-party politics in the 1990s, they managed to lock in profound, lasting political stability.
They also made a massive economic pivot. They looked around and realized that large-scale agriculture on dry volcanic rock was just a totally hopeless endeavor, so they shifted gears completely. Today, a massive 85% of their economy relies purely on services and tourism. They basically took their strategic location and their stark, beautiful landscapes and turned them into an economic engine.
Because of all this, Cape Verde is quite literally the envy of the region today. They're a stable, democratic multi-party state with an emerging, highly engaged civil society. They have peaceful transitions of power and a refreshing lack of business-political corruption, which has made them a true African success story. And that stability? That's exactly the magnet they need to attract the vital foreign investment that keeps them afloat.
But we have to look at the whole picture here. Moving into our final section, surviving the elements and the modern balancing act. Because despite all that political and economic winning, the physical environment itself is still just as hostile today as it was back in 1456. Right now, nearly 21% of their cultivated land faces a significant pressing risk of going completely non-productive. The culprits? The same as always, relentless droughts and a serious lack of modern irrigation tech. Growing food is an everyday battle.
Since they can't grow enough, they have to import almost all of their consumables from the outside world. That creates a structurally uncomfortable trade balance. Add to that the high external debt they had to take on just to build basic infrastructure, and their extreme vulnerability to global climate change, and, well, you've got some very real, very pressing threats hovering over their future.
But, true to the Cape Verdean spirit, they are not taking this lying down. They're fighting back with aggressive, community-led sustainability efforts. They're rolling out marine protected areas designed with direct input from local stakeholders. They're digging anti-erosion trenches, aggressively pushing reforestation, and they're prioritizing wildlife protection, like safeguarding the hawksbill sea turtle nesting sites over on San Nicolau.
So, what is the big takeaway from all this? It's that Cape Verde is an absolute masterclass in human survival. They are living proof that a nation's true wealth doesn't lie in its natural resources or its land, but in the sheer ingenuity of its people. They prove that human resilience, culture, and cooperation really can outlast centuries of neglect and a completely barren Earth.
Which leaves us with one final super-critical question to chew on. As global climate change accelerates and we all face unpredictable environmental shifts, what can the rest of the world learn from a nation that has spent the last 500 years surviving and thriving against absolutely all environmental odds? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it sparks some real curiosity about this incredible nation.